Good morning, everybody. I know you've already had a very full morning. We are running a little bit behind schedule. I will be very precise with time, I promise you. I might even try to catch up a little bit. But we do, on the other hand, have an extremely exciting panel for you. So you might want to hear it all the way to the end. I will introduce the panel in just a few minutes, but I need to know something about you guys. How many really understand what is circular economy? Good. That's probably the best I've had so far. How many of you are working with circular economy? Well, great. How many of you would like to know more about circular economy? Good. Okay, I think it's fair enough. This is not going to turn out to a referendum, but I think it's fair enough to actually just spend a few minutes on explaining just basically what is the circular economy before we move into this very interesting discussion that I will have today with this very, very distinguished panel on sustainable supply chain and circular economy. So just to give you a short idea what it is. Basically, it's about, instead of taking things, materials, producing something and then incinerating it or ending it at a landfill, it's about taking things, using them and designing them in a way so that all the materials can be recycled and brought back to life. So that is the circular idea. So instead of take, make, waste, instead, we take, we produce, and we make sure that we can produce something again and again with the materials. So we have examples from everything from a a huge container ship that can be disassembled and everything can be used again from this container ship, to copy machines that are being brought back to and everything's going to be recycled or remanufactured. We'll hear later today from Dell that actually take back many of the computers and their electronics and reuse many of the whole parts of the computer. And that is the very short version of what circular economy is. In order to make this transition towards a circular economy, it's important that we do a paradigm shift. It's very important that this is driven, I think, mainly by business. This is what I see at the moment. This is really business-driven, but it needs to be in a close cooperation with regulators that can sort of help set standards, remove barriers. We often find legislation that was meant to protect something earlier on that today has become obsolete, or at least stands in the way for recycling more materials. I have a case from Denmark that I love quite a lot, which is if you know, when you drive along the road, you have these small poles of plastic, white plastic, and every 100 meters, so you can mark the road, and at least in the Scandinavian countries. And this plastic is supposed to be a very specific white. And because of that standard, you cannot use recycled plastics. So that would be one place where regulators would have to step in and change regulation and say we can defend that changed in order to be able to recycle more. So it's a smarter way of recycling, and it's designing for recycling, which is different than just recycling, because we lose a lot of things if we don't already in the design phase take into account what is the next life of this product. The circular economy is also very closely linked to this whole shift from product to service. And actually, I have a friend who tells me that every product is a service waiting to happen. So guys, a year ago, together with some of the people might even be in the room, we had a hackathon where we hacked Philips' strategy, and we invented Fridge Flicks, which would be all your household appliances on subscription as a service. And I actually think somebody here could do the business model where you, instead of owning all the plastics in the middle of your dishwasher or your washing machine and owning the right to drive it to the landfill or wherever you drive those things, instead of that, the company would own it, right? The company would own the machine. What does that do? Well, it puts the incentive in the right place, doesn't it? Instead of producing something that runs out in the end in 5, 6, 8 years, that's not lasting too long in order to sell new, you are actually, as a company, interested in something that you don't have to fix all the time because you're selling a service, and something that lasts a long time. And when you get it back, it's yours. So you really want to make sure that you can recycle every part of it. And we've seen a company like Xerox doing this for years with their copying machines, because they people couldn't find the upfront money often for a copying machine, institutions. And so they shifted from selling copy machines to selling copy service. And in that sense, they had copy machines that they got back, and they had to think about the whole design process and how they can recycle every part of the copy machine. And now Xerox actually recycles 98% of all the materials. So that's why this whole shift from product to service is very closely linked to the circular economy. But today, to give you a lot of examples on how it's playing out in different areas of the world, how it's playing out in different sectors, and getting deeper into this, the question of supply chain, sustainable supply chain innovation, we have a panel for you. And I want to ask all of you in the room to start thinking about your questions, because we will have like half an hour for a Q&A. So please post your questions with hashtag SIF15. So, you see it up here, or send a question to question@cop21paris.org, and you can see it, I think, on the screen up there. So please start already now posting your questions, and we will turn to you in 25 minutes. So now we have a panel up here, and it's great people. I will ask them to speak 3-4 minutes, and then we have time for some questions. And guys, I want to warn you, because we got a little delayed this morning, right? So we actually have a buzzer, and it sounds like this. The buzzer? No? Okay, it will be ready, and you don't want to hear it, okay, basically. So the buzzer was not ready, but it will be if I wave my hand. So at least the thread is there. I'm not going to use it, but they should think that I do, because then they speak brief, and they're much better when they're precise and brief. So to kick us all off, it's a great pleasure to first ask you, Dean Scarborough, from you're the CEO of Avery Dennison Corporation. And you actually gave a whole talk yesterday about how you drive sustainable sourcing in your company. So maybe you can give us some of the highlights this morning, please.
Well, I'll try to keep it beyond the buzzer, for sure. Those of you who saw the talk yesterday, one of the things that we talked about was that the fact that we were an industry leader in our core businesses enabled us to use our market power, our purchasing power, to drive change in the whole supply chain. And I think the example that I like to use the most is sourcing FSC certified paper at cost parity. When I went to my suppliers and told them what our objectives were, which were to get 70% of our papers sourced at FSC at cost parity, they asked me why. And I said, they said, well, is there a big market demand? And I said, no, there isn't today. It's actually fairly little. We're just doing it because it's the right thing to do, and that, you know, our company's been in business 80 years, and I want it to be in business 80 years from now. We need a sustainable source of supply of paper. And today, just 3 years later, in Europe alone, 2/3 of our paper supply is FSC certified at cost parity. So we went from a mindset of where I think everyone was telling us all the reasons we could not do this, to 2/3 of our supply in Europe transitioning to something we thought we could never achieve. And it was just through the work, through the dialogue, through the partnership that we had with our suppliers, as well as Rainforest Alliance, that enabled us to do that.
Being a labeling company, you would probably often be relevant for people that want to transition for circular economy, because you would be part of their product, and it's important for them to be able to take back things and recycle them. Do you think about that as a position in the market, or something that you could actually work with, or you're already doing?
Well, we are. I mean, it's the sustainable economy is a wonderful source for innovation. So, for example, a bottle like this, okay, it's polyester. That bottle, during the recycling process, if it uses our technology, a self-adhesive label, previously that plastic could not be easily separated from the label and the adhesive. So therefore, the product could only be downcycled. So we came up with an innovation that enabled the labeling material and the adhesive to be easily separated, so that the plastic in the bottle could be reused again for the same process.
Do you see this as a competitive advantage to your competitors?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, innovation generally is a competitive advantage, and I would say it's created, it's a platform now. Sustainability is a platform for our scientists and our engineers to think differently about the solutions that we can provide in our markets.
And I know you always also use some of these goals on sustainability to mobilize your workforce. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how you do that.
Well, I think we're not a healthcare company, so when we talk about why people want to work for us, we're not in the business of saving lives or doing that. But our vision is to help other companies inspire their brands and to make what we call the world more intelligent. And so as we are teaching our people about sustainable messaging, I think they're enthusiastic about the things that we can do, the problems that we can solve, both in our company by reducing our carbon footprint, or external to help other companies improve their own supply chains.
Another question, which is in the periphery of the circular economy, but still very important today here at Paris, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we've talked a lot about renewable energy, but maybe not as much about energy efficiency as a way of reducing your carbon footprint. So maybe you can tell us how you do that. Yeah, here.
And the bell has come out. Okay.
But you're doing great, Dean.
All right, thank you.
Great start for
feeling
this,
the pressure.
Yeah.
Well, so as I said yesterday, we've been on a journey, and then this year we committed on a 10-year goal to reduce our absolute greenhouse gas emissions by 3% per year. We're going to grow probably around 4 to 5%. So when you think about that, that's a 26% absolute reduction for us over that 10-year period. We'll get about half of that through energy efficiency. That's how we've made most of our gains and goals so far. But we need to invest in renewables, both on-site and also using carbon offsets to achieve the balance of that. And I have to say, my engineers are really excited. When you give them a problem, if you say, hey, I want you to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 1 or 2% next year, okay, we can do that. If you say I want to reduce it by 25% in 10 years, that's a big engineering problem. And so I think that's part of the motivation. People like trying to find solutions to things that are not only helping the company, but are helping our world at the same time.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. And now I want to move to you, Bea. Bea Paris, she's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Coca-Cola. And what I would like you to talk about is Coca-Cola is a brand and a product that is very close to the consumer. So you really have to think about what sustainability means and how it can be implemented and how you can mobilize people and get them on board. Can you tell us a little about what Coca-Cola is thinking in this area?
Sure. So I'll tell just 3 short stories, and they'll be short, and it relates to different ways we can bring to life the circular economy for consumers. I call it bottle to bottle, bottle to bag, and bottle to beauty, and that's in line with the stories. Bottle to bottle is, you see this thing, it's called a preform. This is the flakes that are broken down from this bottle here, and then turn into this, which at the London Olympic Games, 6 weeks right after you drank the Coke in the venue, that was the Coke that was back on the shelf. And so how do you take bottle to bottle and make it work towards a circular economy? And it goes into right in line with making sure that all the components of your bottle can be recycled. Bottle to bag. How do you engage consumers in this journey so they recycle? Because we know recycling rates are still fairly low. People say their intent is good, but it's inconvenient or they don't understand what it turns into. Well, in 2009, before I was Chief Sustainability Officer, a friend of Coke gave me a call. This is what he said on the phone. Waste is only waste if you waste it. I thought, that's brilliant. And then I said, why is Will.i.am calling me talking about waste? He's a singer. Well, he had a vision. How does he get more people to recycle through his shows? Because he looked out one day in a concert in Brazil on the beaches and saw a bunch of bottles all over after the concert was done and empty recycling bins. And what he said is people don't know that actually this bottle can turn into this iPhone case cover. This is one 20-ounce Coke bottle. He helped us launch a program we call it EcoCycle. It's Coke spelled backwards, cycle for recycle. It's in Harrods right now. You can go see it in London, where it's everything from a turn bicycle that's made out of our PET or cans to an Adidas shirt to the iPhone case covers. It's engaging consumers. And the last one is bottle to beauty. And that's why I'm wearing this bracelet right here. So we also think about our communities around the world. Think about favelas in Brazil. We have a program in Brazil called Colectivo, and it's how do you help the women who are the waste pickers clean up their communities? And in 2011, I met this lady, Regina. She had about 5 or 6 employees working for her, and she had a job where literally she explained to me that she'd be on this side of the street, and people would walk all the way around to avoid her. Yet all she was trying to do was clean up her community. And she said, I don't understand. People won't help me, and I'm embarrassed. And it was the local Coca-Cola people there who said, well, let us help you. Maybe what we can do is teach you some clean work standards, help you sell the waste in the aftermarket, and then whatever's left over, partner with artisans to turn it into jewelry. In 2011, Regina gave me this bracelet, and that was the start of her journey. Today, Regina employs 700 people. She's cleaned up her favela, and guess what? It's also good for Coke. In Colectivo markets, where our sales are 9.5% higher than in non-Colectivo markets. So yes, there was some self-interest in cleaning up our branded waste. Regina was looking to do more with the work she had already started, and today she's helping 700 other families simply by recycling. So I love the fact that the circular economy exists, and we have to continue to work together to engage other people in this journey, and that means getting the stories told. And that's Regina's story, or the story of EcoCycle.
B, you showed me this. You can't see it, but it's like a small Coke bottle with granulates in it, and this is being turned into a Coke bottle. It's getting blown back up. And you actually told me that this is more, it's better for both energy and water consumption, or there's less of it, than just the recyclable glass bottle. And I think one thing that is important is when we talk about the circular economy, that we are pretty honest about, where are we going? How far are we? But I think, and doing still the whole eco life cycle assessment and having ideas on how we do things. So I have a question for you, which is your 3D printers. So Coca-Cola EcoCycle do these 3D printers where you can actually feed back a Coca-Cola bottle into this printer. How do you feel about the 3D printer? Because I personally, and I know how many in the room, I'm split. I'm extremely excited about all the opportunities and completely afraid what crap people will start printing when they get it at home. And that everything will be just, in vain because now everybody has this 3D printer. But if we think about it, if we do really, in a long term, feed back all plastics into 3D printers and everything in a way could be taken off the plastic and fed back into the printer, then maybe it's not that bad because then it's all circulating. Right. Do you have like a larger vision on all the work you've done on 3D printing and plastics?
We'd like for everything that you have in your home to be turned into something of value, and that's what we're talking about here. The 3D printers, it's interesting. we launched them over the last year, and what we actually did, the very first thing we did is we didn't necessarily buy them for ourselves or for consumers. We gave them to students throughout the United States in classrooms around science programs or robotics. And it was interesting because they were challenged to actually turn the plastic using the 3D printers into robotics that went into competition. It's a competition that Dean came and started across the US called US First. And it was fascinating to then go out and see the program this past, it was in April, I believe, and what was fascinating is the students had built a lot of their robots out of the 3D printer material, and then part of the game that they created was using the Coca-Cola recycling bins to see if those robots could move the bins. And so for us, the 3D printer was a way to start amplifying the story, get people engaged and to see the possibilities, and it was through the youth generation. And so I don't know where it's going to go, but that's what innovation is, right? You test, you try, you learn, and hopefully it turns into something positive on the other end. And if the worst that comes out of it is you've learned something, I think that that's still good enough.
Okay. Thank you. You guys are beautiful on time. It's so happy with this. So next person is Sherry Nursalim. So, and you're from GT Group. And maybe you can start out by telling us about your work on sustainability.
Thank you, Ida. 2 days ago, I flew in from Singapore to Paris. On my flight was the Singapore Minister, Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, who is here for the COP21 climate negotiations. And I have to share this story because I saw this movie on the plane. It's called Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince. And I think it's adapted a play from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who is, and it's very close to the heart to the French children. And that movie, I think the story goes that this little prince lives on this tiny little planet, and this planet is being threatened by these baobab trees that are growing really rapidly, and it's consuming the planet. And every day, the little prince has to take his shovel and dig out these baobab roots. It's a race in time against the engulfment of this planet that is going to be catastrophic. So one day, there's this seed, and this beautiful rose emerged. And it's miraculous, it's fragile, it's hopeful, but it also offers challenges. So why did I share this? I think the carbon emitting footprint is like the baobab trees. And I think we are in a race against time. And I just shared that we had a meeting with the founding father of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, who passed away this year, who met with us together with our partners, Conservation International, and the chairman of Walmart, Rob Walton. And he was lamenting about that there is too much humanity. And we are not one little prince. We have 73.3 billion people on this planet. And at the time, we were all part of planting these baobab trees because we believe that it has some economic benefits and create jobs. And however, it is not a circular economy. So I think, to me, the circular economy, I think it relates to not creating products that are harmful, or even if you have waste, how you turn it into good use. And I think there are many studies on that. A friend of mine wrote Waste to Wealth. I think that research explains how in 2030, $4.5 trillion of additional economic income could be generated. And so GT, our group, we're diversified. We are the market leader in auto tire manufacturing in China, in Indonesia, Southeast Asia, and we are developing a new plant that will be in the US, that will be closer to the market, and also will be on 100% renewable energy. We are also in the real estate development, And to that end, I'm working on a township development or it's an eco-island development. And this is in Bali. I think earlier Vinod, I think, talked about the Ban Ki-moon releasing the Bali sterling. So the Bali government, apart from, also the Bali action plan was achieved there, but they announced that they would like to be 100% renewable energy, and that the Minister of Energy has also announced that Bali will be a global hub for research for scientific community and businesses and different academia to come in to research on sustainability. So in our real estate development, we're testing out all kinds of methodologies that I think, like what I heard from Dennis, and like people said that's not possible, but we have done it. And I think there's a lot of lessons in there, but we are very grateful that the United Nations Global Initiative, the Sustainable Development Solution Network, will have the Southeast Asia headquarters in our development. And so I think my hope is that we will be able to say to the little prince, we are adults, but we are waking out from our nightmares, and hopefully we'll be able to together save this little planet. Thank you.
So, Sherry, I saw this cartoon the other day. So it was like two pictures of the same crowd of people, and then this leader asking them, who wants change? And everybody went, yay! Who wants to change? Everybody was like this. So, I mean, thank you for reminding us of the moral imperative. I think it's extremely important, and we should not forget it in all the times where we talk about business, that there is also a moral imperative. And you and I talked about the importance of the sectors working together. So it's not enough that you move, but you also need the regulators. You need the academia to work together. In South Africa, they have put a fee on tires to make sure that they're recycled. So it's a company called Redisa in South Africa. It's a very interesting case. They have, from the state, been allowed to put a fee on tires, and this fee is used in the township of South Africa to collect the tires and make sure that they're recycled. So, I mean, this is, I think, a brilliant example of manufacturers, companies, academia, and politicians working together. Do you have good examples of something like this?
Yes, there are, I think, good examples. I think in our efforts, we have a foundation called United in Diversity, and we believe, I think that is like that flower, that rose, to get collaboration across sectors. And we work with MIT. We have worked for 2 decades now, but for the past 10 years, I think we have had some breakthroughs. And working together with Indonesian governments, with Chinese government, and I think in one way, I think the breakthrough on sort of the setting the standards of having 100% renewable energy, but we also have a lot of prototypes that are linked to the community. One example is this area in Bojonegoro, and I think the Bupati, it's kind of like the governor, created a methodology to make roads. Instead of using asphalt, it's actually homemade materials that is like a blocks, and so it created a lot of community jobs, but at the same time, there's a lot of pride, and they could actually save a lot of money for that township. So we are going to apply that 100% in our development. So I think there are these type of methodologies where you have government working together with the business as well as the communities, and I think we actually have challenge too. Sorry, you asked for good example, but there's challenges because I'm also on the International Chambers of Commerce Board, and I really feel that it is important for governments also not to subsidize sort of industries that might be inefficient, and then I think that is changing, and there's a lot of awareness about that, because if there's an overcapacity, even we recycle, we actually retread everything. I think we have a factory that makes floor mats and everything from the recycled tires and everything. But car trucks, they don't want to retread if it's much cheaper to get replacement. But that may not be an economic model because it's subsidized. So I think whether it's tariffs or whether there's subsidies, there's importance for the government also, and I think to work closely with the businesses to make this really sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll get back to this interplay between governments and companies in the Q&A. So now we move to Mindy Luber, who is the president of Ceres and a founding board member of the organization. And she also directs Ceres Investor Network on Climate Risk. It is a group of 120 institutional investors managing nearly $13 trillion in assets focused on the business risks and opportunities of climate change. And please tell us how you work with investors and how you make them to really understand the risks and the opportunities of moving into the more sustainable investments.
Great. How's this? Happy to do that. So let me weave that into 2 or 3 points that I want to make in response to all that we're hearing today. But why do investors care? And I would argue it's the same reason businesses care. If we look at the imperatives of the 21st century economy, the need to move to some kind of circular economy to be more sustainable is no longer a nice to do. It has now become a must do, a can do. But it doesn't happen as easily. So I also want to talk for a minute about the systems to get us there. But without question, we look right now at a world going to 9 billion people in 2030. The amount of resources that are needed for that are probably something we can't completely calculate. We also know that 3 billion more people will be coming online and being middle-class consumers. So the amount of resources needed, the amount of product needed to satisfy that may very well not be able to be met by its products and by the natural resources it takes to create those products for 9 billion people and 3 billion more middle-class people, unless we think about a circular economy, unless we think about things differently. So that's just the obvious. The only point I'm making there is it used to be we talked about a circular economy 5 years ago, 7 years ago, as a new trend, as something nice, as a little niche that a few companies were looking at. It must be integrated into what our largest and all companies are doing if we are going to move forward, given the kind of climatic changes that may even change the resources available to us. Resources that we thought were available today are not necessarily available. When the cotton crop is harmed by the weather changes, those resources are no longer available to apparel companies. And we could go across every sector of the economy and fully appreciate that this is not only a nice, new, trendy, niche thing to talk about, that being circular economy, but it is an imperative as we move into our 21st century economy. I want to say 1 or 2 other things before giving my 2 or 3 favorite examples of our circular economy. One is that, like everything else, it will not happen poof. Even if it sounds obvious, even if I sit up here and my colleagues who are living this every day say it is an imperative, things don't just happen and change across our economy. There needs to be systems change, changes in key stakeholders to make sure that we're enabled to do this. So when I talk to many of the 70 companies that are in our network, or 110 investors that we work with, they want to know how to make this happen. Not only it's a nice thing to do, and yes, we're facing perhaps a shortage of natural resources, climate change devastating certain parts of the world, making certain natural resources entirely unavailable. So let's think for a minute about what it takes, what are investors and companies looking at to make sure we could get there. And that is a few things. One is we've got to have standards. We must have standards for resource use. And companies, if we don't have government standards, need to set those standards and industry-wide standards for how we use resources and what the circular economy looks like. 2 is it has to be integrated into the company from the boardroom to the supply chain. Goals need to be set, and there must be specific goals, and they've got to get buy-in at the governance level and educate the entire workforce and integrate it throughout the supply chain. When there are not specific goals, things generally don't happen or don't happen elegantly. they've got to be integrated and enforced. One big glitch that we find is sustainability officers believe that the imperative is X and set goals, but if the chief financial officer, if the procurement official at Coke or at any of your companies is not online with those goals set at the highest level of the companies, we don't get the kind of integration and we don't get action. So I want to urge everybody, as we think about these great examples, they can't only be great examples, they've got to be integrated from the boardroom to the supply chain. Specific goals need to be set, companies need to be trained, suppliers need to be trained. The large companies sitting up here have the resources, many of the suppliers don't. Just very quickly, the one or two examples that are just living examples that I've liked. One is Dell, in terms of recycling their waste packaging by 2020. I believe today they've already recycled 4.2 million pounds of plastic and are recycling them back into their products. It took an organization-wide effort like you just heard from Coke. Or GM in a very depressed economic community. In the city of Detroit, which actually went into bankruptcy for a moment, city of Detroit is seeing a resurgence, and many things are causing that, but GM built an opportunity for sharing waste, where one company's waste became another company's resources to make their products, and it has had a profound impact in that community. We've also seen 122 GM facilities that have gone landfill free. Nothing is being sent to the landfills. They are reusing, or they're sharing, or they're selling. It has been part of their economic viability, and it's working. Very quickly, because it's so near and dear to my heart, I want to mention one thing about this company that's sitting next to me, Coca-Cola, and Bea talked about some of the things that they're doing. But as we watched Coke set goals about returning to the communities the equivalent of water used in their beverage production, literally, people worry. There are limitations to water. We are getting to a point where we'll be at war over water. We have to think about it at every step of our production with every sector. What we saw Coke do between 2005 and 2014 is get to a point where 153 billion liters of water were returned to the communities where that water was taken out. Those are communities that are going to want to host businesses, that are coming into their communities, that are being environmentally responsible, that are allowing those communities to thrive.
Thank you, Mindy. And now it's time to hear from another region. Luis Enrique Berisbeitia, you are the Executive Vice President of CAF, which is the Development Bank of Latin America. I know you're developing a program on bioeconomy and circular economy. Maybe you can tell us about this.
Thank you, Ida. Well, as a Development Bank of Latin America, we necessarily have a multifaceted and very broad-based approach to sustainable development, which is based on macroeconomic stability, microeconomic efficiency, social inclusion, and of course environmental sustainability, in a sense all tied together through our efforts to support efficient and sustainable productive transformation in the Latin American region. If we focus on the environmental dimension, we obviously have to look at the natural capital of Latin America, which is one of our most important comparative advantages, which we want to use as a mechanism to attain competitive advantages for the region, of course. And our sustainable development efforts as regards the natural capital are focused on the conservation, the rational utilization of the natural resources, and of course, the social dimension, the inclusion of the social dimension in this. In some ways, we have been working in many pilot projects and some larger scale projects, mostly in what I would call biotrade or bioagricultural initiatives. And I'll give a few examples in which we provide certain degrees of financing to help the producers attain access to technology, for example, in energy efficiency, market access by certification of natural products, and of course providing financial support. One of these projects is a small project in the region of Peru and Bolivia regarding the production of Brazil nuts, which is a very significant production, considering that a small company in Bolivia has exported close to $200 million a year of Brazil nuts to the world in the last year. We're also working on the larger scale eco-tourism projects in the north of Peru, and cocoa supply chains in the region, in Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. We have an important biogas initiative working with dairy producers in Uruguay. It's coming along. And more generally, we are supporting several energy efficiency processes in Latin American cities. We have an important focus on urban centers, as Latin America is highly urbanized. About 80% of our population lives in urban areas. So given that CAF is quite focused on infrastructure and all types of infrastructure, social infrastructure, productive infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, etc., and all of that is concentrated to a high degree in cities. We have an important cities development program. I think our overall objective is to demonstrate the sustainability of these value chains, both operationally, environmentally, and socially, with a long-term view to help protect and develop sustainably our vulnerable ecosystems in Amazonia, the Cerrado, Patagonia, and other important ecosystems in Latin America. Thank you.
So do you see this as a moral imperative that we do this change, or do you see it as an economic opportunity for the region?
No, as I suggested, I think we have to take an intelligent, sustainable, and rational advantage of these very important comparative advantages that we have in Latin America, mostly natural resource-based, mostly renewable resources, and they have been demonstrated to be not only a moral imperative, but also a very rational business incentive imperative. I think we have to put value on positive externalities, and we have to put value or costs on negative externalities to help develop some of these ideas. I think one way of going from theory to practice is making businesses be rewarded by the positive externalities, or perhaps be castigated by negative externalities. And I think, in a sense, a role of a development bank is to create consciousness and create mechanisms that will at least reward the positive externalities.
I think it's a very beautiful vision to end this panel on the first half. And before we move on to the Q&A, I will urge all of you to put your question at COP21. I already have a lot of good questions, but we could have more. Or tweet it to SIF15. So while you do that, please remember to also listen, because we now have a special intervention from Adrian Grenier, who is an American actor who is recognized for his role in independent films like The Adventures of Sebastian Coe. And some of you might also know him from the popular cable television series Entourage. And Adrian, I know you have a lot of interesting views. Yeah, if you come up here, over there. So, Adrian, and you're not only an actor, you're also the social good advocate for Dell.
Yes, I am.
And I think the combination is brilliant, because you reach out probably a little further than some of us. Can you tell us what you're hoping to accomplish here in Paris and why you're here?
Well, I'm very happy to be here as Dell's social good advocate, and to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing together. I'm helping Dell achieve their legacy of good goals by 2020, some to do with upcycling plastic into new computers, and also e-waste, taking that out of the waste stream. In fact, a couple weeks ago, we did a tech take-back campaign in partnership with Uber, and we took 1 ton of e-waste out of the waste stream in under 6 hours. So I'm helping them do that, do better, do good, because they have a genuine desire to do so. And in exchange, they're helping me achieve some of my environmental goals having to do with the oceans. So we recently launched the Lonely Whale Foundation several days ago. designed to inspire a greater connection to the wonder, the beauty, and the importance of the precious ecosystem, which is our oceans.
I know you're a busy person. You must have a lot of work to do. So tell us what brought you to invest your time in this? What was sort of the thing that got you there, or?
Well, it's just a survival imperative, really. But also beyond that, it's to me, it's about beauty, living and improving our quality of life. To me, it's a privilege, but also it's an important step towards a happier life when you're able to give back to the world and help your community. And so I'm just rising the ladder of a better life.
I think that's a very beautiful intervention. Please give Adrian a hand. I think it's important what you just reminded us, that sometimes the movement, the green movement, through years and years and years, was sort of seen as somebody that, from the outside, did not like life. Don't eat meat, don't fly, don't buy too many things, don't, overuse things. And the truth is, from those coming inside the green movement, is that they love life so much that they want to sustain it. And I think flipping this whole discussion around and getting people like yourself to really get people to understand that this is because we love life, that we are doing this transition to a green economy, is extremely important. So thank you for your work, and thank you for doing it. You're reaching out to a lot of people. I think it's very important. So thank you. So now we move to the Q&A. We have a little shorter time, but I think it's worth it. So we have some very interesting question here. So first question for you is about branded waste and the relation to a circular economy, because of course you also want to get your things back. Do you have like a percent of branded waste that you want to get out of the environment and into the loop, or do you have visions and targets on this area?
Yes, what Mindy said is really important, is setting clear goals and commitments and then measuring and tracking them on an annual basis and then reporting out on them publicly. So we set goals around recycling and recovery to recover 70% of our packages in developed markets. We're also building the baselines in developing and emerging markets at the same time. And there is self-interest. We're in business, we're for profit, and it's important that we're also mindful of the impact we have in our communities. And so if we sell 1.9 billion, Cokes a day, it's sold in something. And so I use the term branded waste because I do recognize that in many communities, we are the #1 brand. And so it's important for us to build programs with communities where they benefit and we benefit to recover that waste. The reason why will.i.am came to us when he was in Brazil and he saw what was going on is because he asked a question. He said, well, I saw your recycling bins there. They were empty. I don't understand. And so we've recognized that it's not enough to just have the infrastructure and to partner with communities. It's also engaging people so they understand the role that they also play in putting that bottle into those recycling bins. And it's important because we want to be a responsible business and we want to be mindful of that impact. Well, we're very proud that we are on track to deliver these goals to 2020, and it's certainly done with a lot of partnerships around the world. And it's in partnership with the communities that we're working with.
Okay, and I have another question here, which I would pose for you, Sherry, which is if we are going to make this transition happen, maybe shifting from product to service or shifting towards a circular economy, how much government regulation is needed in your view, and how much will happen from business-driven or just consumers' demand?
That's a very big question. I think in terms of our own industry, I think we have tested some of this in, for example, the city buses. We do pay sort of for the service. It's pay sort of a product for service. In terms of government, I think it really depends. I think I like what the Secretary of Energy said this morning. You have to have innovation in the policy, innovation in business, innovation in science, and so. But how to integrate the three? And I think That is a very key part to have the successful policies. And we have many examples of that happening, and through our efforts of tri-sector collaboration, and I think we facilitated these tri-sector leaders, perhaps around a particular issues, and the MIT faculty and also our faculty, we work together, and we take them on a journey actually, and there's a whole process. It's called the U process, and we also use a systems approach, which I think Jay Forrester, who invented the logic chip that outsourced to IBM and later made the computer revolution also possible. I think he invented the system dynamic modeling so that you could interrelate all the issues in a very simple diagram. I think that has been very helpful. And I think, but scaling up these is difficult if you have to facilitate and the faculty's time are limited, but I think MIT has created this system, a MOOC system, and they created U Labs where, they have outreach in one session, 45,000 people, and many companies from Alibaba, Google, and all over the world are part of this process. There's hundreds of hubs around the world. So we have seen successful cases where policies have changed, where efforts have been implemented in companies, collaborative efforts. So I'm very hopeful, but I think we do have to combine, the arts, the science, the design, but most importantly, I think what Breton from Solar Impulse said, it's really the mindset. Thank you.
I have a question here, and I think it's how do we show the sustainability of a product or a service, including direct and indirect CO2 emissions, to change the behavior of the consumers? I think it's a good question, and I will actually try to direct it to you, Luis, because it would probably be a competitive advantage for you if we could somehow show the rest of the world that these products have that that special quality. How are you thinking about getting the brand or getting the value out of this transition to a bioeconomy?
Well, thank you. We're not too much concentrated on specific products at CAF, of course, as we are a development bank. However, I think consumer education, in a sense, or consumer culture in general, is obviously a very important dimension of this whole process of sustainability and the circular economy, etc. And I think we try to do, as I suggested yesterday when we presented the voluntary principles for mainstreaming climate change in financial institutions, we try to do by example what we are preaching in a sense. So we apply to our own organization carbon footprints and the like in order to demonstrate to our stakeholders, be they normal citizens, be they governments, be they clients, that we practice what we preach, and that these objectives can be also advantageous for their own purposes. So my feeling is that obviously consumer education in a broad sense, how that is done, I think maybe Coca-Cola companies and the like are more prepared than myself to answer that. But consumer education is certainly a very significant and important mechanism to promote sustainability in our consumer mindset, as it were.
B, do you want to comment on this? Because I think you have a lot of things to say about that.
Sure. So I'll just give a shout out to our local France team. They recognize the same challenge. And how do you communicate? And not just with consumers, but also there's some stakeholders who don't really understand circular economy and what these issues are. And so they worked to create an education center on circular economy called Infinio. And they bring stakeholders, consumers, and our own associates to make sure that everyone is well informed and has a chance to experience what it actually means. They actually get to see the facility where the flakes are being turned into the other materials and how the process actually works. And what we're also finding in a lot of our research and data when we tell the story is if we use too much jargon or scientific language, it doesn't connect. Turning into real-time stories, telling Regina's story in the favela in Brazil and how she's now empowered and employing other people and what that's meant to her in her life, that's a great story that people can identify with and relate to. And they also understand the impact on the planet and that it's cleaning it up at the same time. But simple language using stories is best.
And I think we will end this panel on a question that actually led directly to you, Mindy, sort of to educate other stakeholders. Do you tell the investors the whole story of circular economy, or do you show them numbers of risk and opportunity, or how do you work with that more on the ground?
Well, I think you need to speak to people where they are. You need to speak to people where they are and talk their language. That doesn't mean, though, I've been reminded by dozens of corporate executives in training for their boards and others that they are moral leaders as well. So sometimes it's not just about the economics. And we ought not to lose sight of it. It is a combination of things. But without question, investors and companies need to look at their return on investment. Can they make money? And the circular economy happens to be not only intuitively, but factually a great area where you can show savings as well as preserving the environment. For the investors we represent who are looking every day at whether or not companies are sustainability leaders, because they're making the determination that a company that addresses sustainability is a company looking at the short term and the long term, a company that's being responsible and well managed. Those are the companies they want to be invested in. And companies that are more flagrant or taking risks and suggesting that somehow these issues could be dealt with 10 years hence and not now, are losing favor with the large investors, and that's happening quite quickly. We are seeing businesses and investors understanding more every day, not just the leaders who are up here, but hundreds of businesses, that the time is to act is now. But I do want to say one other thing, and that is, you asked the question about regulation. We need to see not hundreds, but thousands and tens of thousands of companies operating using the kind of standards that we're talking about. And that may very well take some government intervention. Not everybody has the ability to do what the leaders up here are doing. So it will take all of us. But I can say with certainty, we are able to show and bring to the investors the analysis that shows companies that are leading on sustainability are companies that are making money, doing well, beating the market, and well managed.
Thank you so much. I think this whole discussion up here today has been very illustrative of what I've seen as a big paradigm shift here in Paris. That instead of a time where we were talking about burden sharing and can you carry this burden, please? I can't. It's too heavy for me. I don't want to change. This has been about bundling opportunities. And it's been a clear signal that business is on board, industry is on board, investors are on board. They want regulators to take their responsibility. Maybe they cannot fix everything, but at least do what you can to fix the framework for us. It's been a very clear message. So I think the circular economy is a great example of how you can actually get environment and growth to come together in smart ways. And Paris has, for me, been about that. So I think there's a whole different optimism and almost, I do care what they come out with, but at least I think what's happening around the negotiations in the Blue Zone is just as important. And I think I really want to thank all of you here today for leading that and for giving us the courage to go back. I'll go to the conference center now and knock on the door and the Danish minister and tell him, you know what, Coca-Cola and all the investors, and they all want this, so move, guys. And I want to thank the audience for the great questions and for joining in, and thank this great panel for the discussion today.